Welcome to Avoidant Decoded, where we uncover the hidden psychology behind avoidant attachment, emotional distance, and the behaviors people often struggle to understand. If you want deeper insights into love, connection, and the patterns that shape relationships, you're in the right place. And if you want to support the channel and become part of our growing community, consider joining the Avoidant Decoded membership. Now let's begin and uncover what their silence may actually be trying to say. They may never look directly at you and say, "I love you," but the next time they see you struggling, watch what they do. Their behavior may reveal emotions they cannot put into words. Avoidant people often don't express love through obvious declarations. Instead, their feelings can appear in small, almost unnoticed actions. Once you learn how to recognize those signals, their silence may stop looking like rejection. There is one behavior people often misunderstand when an avoidant is genuinely afraid of losing someone they care about. From the outside, it can look like withdrawal, coldness, or emotional distance. That is exactly why so many people misread it. They spend months believing the relationship meant nothing, when sometimes the deeper issue is that emotional closeness has activated fears they don't know how to manage. Before we go further, if any of this reminds you of someone you know, or someone who once mattered deeply to you, type "seen" in the comments. There are many people carrying the same unanswered questions and wondering why someone who seemed to care could never simply say what they felt. If this story feels familiar, you're not alone. Leave that one word before you continue, because sometimes realizing that others have lived through the same confusing experience can bring a strange sense of clarity. One of the biggest misunderstandings about avoidant attachment is the belief that avoidant people are incapable of love. That's not necessarily what is happening. Often, what they struggle with is expressing love in the ways other people naturally expect. An avoidant person is not automatically cold, heartless, or indifferent. Many learn it early that depending on another person could lead to disappointment, rejection, criticism, or emotional pain. Perhaps they had a caregiver who was physically present but emotionally distant. Maybe their feelings were ignored, minimized, or treated as an inconvenience. Or perhaps they learned that asking for comfort only made them feel more vulnerable. Over time, they may have developed a powerful belief: "I am safer when I handle everything myself." That belief can become deeply ingrained. Imagine growing up in an environment where showing sadness brought criticism instead of comfort. Imagine learning at an early age that revealing pain made you feel exposed rather than supported. Eventually, hiding vulnerable emotions becomes the safest strategy available. That pattern can follow someone well into adulthood. It isn't simply a personality trait they chose one day. It can be a protective response that developed when they were young and later became their normal way of dealing with emotional closeness. So when you encounter an avoidant adult, you may not be dealing with someone who lacks emotional depth. You may be dealing with someone who became extremely skilled at keeping that emotional depth hidden. And this is what makes avoidant behavior so confusing. From the outside, their silence can look like they don't care. Internally, however, they may be experiencing much more emotion than they know how to handle. For some avoidant individuals, intimacy can activate a strong protective response. The closer someone gets, the more exposed they may feel. Their nervous system can interpret emotional vulnerability as something that needs to be controlled or escaped. That means they may recognize how deeply they care long before they know how to communicate it. Their feelings can show up through subtle behaviors that are easy to overlook. To someone who expects affection through words, constant reassurance, or obvious emotional expression, these behaviors might seem insignificant. But when you understand their usual pattern, those small changes can become meaningful. This is why you should be careful about immediately interpreting every avoidant behavior as proof that they don't care. Sometimes people walk away from relationships because they mistake emotional fear for emotional emptiness. One of the earliest signs can appear in something incredibly ordinary. They start voluntarily sharing pieces of their daily life. They may tell you where they're going, mention what they're doing, explain why they're running late, or casually tell you when they expect to be home. You didn't ask for an explanation. They simply started offering it. For many people, that sounds completely normal. But if someone is naturally private and accustomed to keeping their life separate from others, voluntarily sharing these details can represent a meaningful shift. They're giving you access to a part of their world they normally keep behind a wall. So imagine your avoidant partner suddenly texting, "I'm running late, I'm at my sister's place," or "I'll probably be home around 9. If they never used to communicate this way, don't automatically dismiss it as meaningless small talk. The deeper significance may not be the information itself. It's the fact that they thought of you and chose to include you. Their natural instinct may be to keep things to themselves. When they begin sharing ordinary details without being pressured, they may be slowly allowing you into their everyday life. Each little update can represent another layer of trust. They're not necessarily thinking, I'm showing this person that I trust them. They may not even realize the emotional meaning behind what they're doing. But behavior often communicates things that conscious words cannot. What looks ordinary on the surface can therefore represent something much deeper. You are becoming part of my world. The next sign is much harder to recognize because it can look almost exactly like the opposite of love. It happens when an avoidant pulls back after a moment of genuine emotional closeness. Maybe you spend an amazing evening together, you talk openly, you laugh, connect, and share something vulnerable. For a while, it feels like the emotional distance between you has finally disappeared. Then suddenly, they become quieter, their messages become shorter, they seem distracted, they need more space. The warmth you felt yesterday seems to disappear overnight. This is where many people immediately turn the blame inward. They start asking themselves, what did I do? Did I say something wrong? Did I make them lose interest? But sometimes, the withdrawal isn't about something you did at all. For an avoidant person, intense closeness can activate old protective patterns. After experiencing a powerful moment of intimacy, they may suddenly feel exposed. Their instinct is to create distance so they can regain a sense of emotional control. That doesn't automatically mean they stopped caring. Sometimes the opposite is true. The connection affected them so deeply that they don't know how to comfortably hold what they're feeling. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of avoidant relationships. The moments when they retreat can sometimes come immediately after the moments when they felt closest to you. If you respond by chasing, demanding immediate reassurance, or reacting with anger, you may unintentionally increase the pressure they are already trying to escape. But if you remain grounded, give them reasonable space, and continue protecting your own emotional boundaries, something different can happen. Once they feel regulated again, they may naturally move closer, not because you force them, not because you convince them, but because connection begins to feel safe again. Another important clue can be found in what they consistently do rather than what they say. Pay attention to their behavior. An avoidant person may struggle to say, I love you, yet express care through practical actions. They might fix something that has been bothering you. They may offer assistance before you even ask. They could notice a problem you're dealing with and quietly find a way to help without expecting praise or recognition. Perhaps they remember you casually mentioned needing something weeks ago. Perhaps they notice when you're overwhelmed and take something off your plate. Perhaps they solve a small problem simply because they know it would make your day easier. For someone who doesn't naturally communicate affection through emotional language, practical care can become their way of saying what they struggle to speak aloud. Maybe you once mentioned that your back was hurting, and several days later a heating pad suddenly appeared at your door. Or perhaps you were stressed about an expense, and they quietly handled it without making a big announcement or expecting you to thank them. These moments can seem ordinary, but they may carry far more meaning than they appear to. For someone who struggles with emotional vulnerability, actions can feel much safer than words. They may not know how to sit down and explain everything they feel, but they can show it by being dependable, solving problems, remembering what matters to you, and quietly making your life easier. If you've ever thought, they almost never tell me what they're feeling, but whenever I genuinely need them, they're there, you may be seeing their version of emotional expression. Their affection may appear through consistency rather than romantic speeches. They fix things, they carry burdens, they notice details, they step in when something is wrong. In their mind, those actions may be saying, you matter to me, even when they cannot bring themselves to say those exact words. Understanding this doesn't mean you should ignore your emotional needs. You still deserve communication, reassurance, and a relationship where your needs matter. But recognizing different forms of affection can prevent you from overlooking genuine care simply because it doesn't arrive in the form you expected. Another major shift happens when an avoidant begins allowing you into their private emotional world. People with strong avoidant tendencies often keep painful experiences locked away. They may avoid talking about childhood wounds, previous relationships, fears, insecurities, or anything that makes them feel emotionally exposed. When a conversation starts becoming too personal, their instinct may be to change the subject, joke, become distracted, or move towards something less vulnerable. So when they actually stay in the conversation and answer a difficult question, pay attention. Maybe you gently ask what their childhood was like. Maybe you ask what happened in a previous relationship. Perhaps you ask about something they've always avoided discussing, and instead of shutting down, they give you a small glimpse into that part of their life. To you, it might feel like a normal conversation. To them, it may represent a significant act of trust. They are allowing you to see something they normally keep hidden. They're showing you pieces of themselves that they have spent years protecting from other people. And when someone who is usually guarded voluntarily becomes vulnerable with you, that opening can be more meaningful than a dramatic declaration of love. There is another pattern that can be especially confusing. Sometimes an avoidant creates tension precisely when the relationship seems to be going well. Everything may feel peaceful. You finally feel connected. Communication is improving. The relationship seems more stable than it has ever been. Then suddenly they become irritated, unusually critical, distant, or start an argument over something that doesn't seem important. From the outside, this can look like deliberate self-sabotage, and in some cases, it can be. But the underlying reason isn't always cruelty or manipulation. For someone who associates deep closeness with eventual disappointment, stability itself can become uncomfortable. When the relationship begins to feel important, their protective instincts may start preparing for the possibility of getting hurt. Instead of waiting for the feared pain to arrive, they may unconsciously create distance first. If you notice that emotional turbulence repeatedly appears during the healthiest periods of the relationship, don't automatically assume you've done something wrong. Recognizing the pattern calmly can be more productive than responding with blame, panic, or retaliation. And if several of these behaviors remind you of someone from your own life, type "seen" in the comments. You may be looking back at moments you once interpreted as rejection and realizing that some of them may have been driven by fear, discomfort with intimacy, or an inability to manage strong emotions. That realization can change the way you understand the entire relationship. Because sometimes what looks like someone abandoning the connection is actually someone struggling to manage feelings they were never taught to handle safely. There's also a subtle clue hidden inside casual conversations about the future. Avoidant people can be uncomfortable with long-term planning because the future can make a relationship feel more serious and emotionally binding. Talking about next year can mean imagining commitment, dependence, permanence, and deeper intimacy. So when someone who normally avoids those conversations suddenly says, "We'll probably go to my cousin's wedding next spring," or jokingly says something like, "You'll probably be tired of me by our third Christmas," don't immediately dismiss it. They may be casually imagining a future in which you're still there. They may not even realize how significant that statement is. But they're allowing themselves to picture continued connection instead of automatically protecting themselves from it. For someone who usually keeps emotional distance, these seemingly casual future references can reveal a surprising amount. Another powerful sign appears when your life becomes genuinely difficult. Avoidants are often described as people who disappear when emotions become intense. Sometimes that does happen, but when someone with avoidant tendencies truly cares about you, difficult circumstances can bring out an entirely different side of them. Imagine you're grieving someone you love. Maybe you're facing a frightening personal situation, dealing with serious stress, or simply having one of those days when everything feels impossible. A person who isn't emotionally invested may use the situation as another reason to stay away, but someone who genuinely cares may surprise you. They might not have the perfect words. They may feel awkward around intense emotions. They may not know how to comfort you in the way another person would. Yet they still show up. They call when they normally wouldn't. They rearrange their schedule. They come to see you. They sit beside you even when they don't know what to say. Their presence becomes the message. Another revealing moment comes after conflict. During an argument, an avoidant may shut down, become quiet, leave the room, or create physical and emotional distance. That response may be part of their established coping pattern. But don't only pay attention to what happens during the conflict. Watch what happens afterward. Someone who truly feels nothing may allow the silence to continue indefinitely. They may simply let the relationship disappear. But someone who values the connection often finds some quiet path back. They might not immediately apologize or initiate a deep emotional conversation. Instead, they may make your favorite coffee, send a simple text asking whether you've eaten, sit beside you, or do something small that restores contact. The gesture may appear unrelated to the argument, but the message underneath can be simple: "I don't want us to stay disconnected." Another meaningful change occurs when they begin combining different areas of their life. Avoidant people can be very protective of their separate worlds. Family may occupy one space, friends another, work another, and romantic relationships another. Keeping these areas separate can help them maintain a sense of control. So when they begin bringing you into those previously separate spaces, notice the shift. Maybe they introduce you to an old childhood friend. Maybe they invite you to a family gathering. Maybe they naturally mention you when speaking with people who matter to them. That's more than simply introducing someone. They're making space for you inside the larger structure of their life. Instead of keeping you safely contained within one private part of their world, they're allowing different parts of their life to overlap with you. For someone who values emotional separation, that can represent a significant level of trust. Physical affection can reveal another layer that words sometimes cannot. Someone may struggle to talk openly about their feelings while still naturally seeking physical closeness. They might place a hand on your back while you're cooking, sit beside you without needing conversation, lean against you after a difficult day, or fall asleep while maintaining some small point of contact. These moments can feel insignificant because nothing dramatic is happening, but everyday physical closeness can communicate comfort, familiarity, and emotional safety. They may also remember tiny details you mentioned months earlier. Your favorite flower appears unexpectedly. They prepare your food exactly the way you like it. Something you once said you wanted suddenly becomes part of a future plan. They don't necessarily announce that they remembered, they simply act on it. That quiet attention can reveal how closely they've been listening, even if they rarely make a big emotional display about it. Perhaps one of the most intimate signs appears when they allow you to see their imperfections. Avoidant people often place enormous value on appearing capable, independent, and in control. Showing fear, uncertainty, failure, or emotional weakness can feel deeply uncomfortable. So if they eventually tell you they're struggling at work, admit they don't know what to do, confess that they're afraid, or even allow themselves to cry in front of you without immediately hiding behind humor or changing the subject, don't overlook that moment. That isn't simply weakness, it can be trust. They're allowing you to see the parts of themselves they normally protect from almost everyone. And that kind of vulnerability may reveal more about their feelings than any perfectly rehearsed romantic statement ever could. Now we reach one of the most misunderstood signs of all. It often appears when they believe they might actually lose you. Someone who feels completely indifferent can often walk away and never look back. Genuine emotional detachment rarely creates a powerful internal struggle about losing the relationship, but when an avoidant truly cares, the possibility of losing someone can bring emotions to the surface that they have spent a long time keeping under control, and sometimes that is when their behavior tells you what their words never could. When an avoidant truly cares, something interesting can happen right before they pull away. For a short moment, they may become more present. They reach out first, ask questions, or suddenly reveal something vulnerable, then quickly retreat as though they said too much. That sudden warmth followed by distance can reflect an internal struggle between wanting closeness and fearing what closeness might bring. But understanding these patterns should never mean ignoring your own needs. You can have compassion for someone's attachment style while still wanting reassurance, emotional openness, consistency, and honest communication. Understanding why someone struggles with intimacy should help you see the situation more clearly, not convince you to accept a relationship that continually leaves you emotionally drained. If you're dealing with this dynamic, chasing them every time they withdraw usually isn't the answer. Constant messages, pressure, or demands for reassurance can increase the emotional intensity they're already struggling with. A steadier approach is often more helpful. Stay warm, grounded, and clear about your boundaries. When things are calm, you might simply say, "I've noticed you sometimes become distant after we get closer, and I want you to know that I'm not trying to pressure you." Small, calm conversations can create more safety than intense confrontations. And when they do make an effort to connect, acknowledge it. If they show affection through actions rather than words, recognize those actions. Feeling understood can make emotional vulnerability less frightening and may encourage them to communicate more openly over time. And if you're the person who recognizes yourself in these avoidant patterns, remember this: the walls you built were not created because you were broken. At some point, your mind learned that depending on people could lead to pain, so protecting yourself became the safest option you knew. But what once protected you doesn't have to control your future. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It happens through small choices to stay present, communicate honestly, tolerate vulnerability, and respond differently from the patterns you learned long ago. Awareness is the beginning, because you cannot change a pattern you cannot recognize. And if you're the person loving someone avoidant, their silence should never become a measurement of your worth. Their difficulty expressing affection began long before you entered their life. It doesn't prove you're unlovable, and it doesn't mean you failed to earn their love. At the same time, compassion doesn't require self-abandonment. You are allowed to decide how much patience and emotional uncertainty you're willing to live with. Whether you stay or walk away, your choice deserves to protect your well-being. The goal is not to decode someone forever. The goal is clarity. Once you understand what may be happening beneath the surface, you can stop blaming yourself for every moment of distance and start making decisions from understanding rather than confusion. If this connected with your experience, type "seen" in the comments and tell me which sign affected you the most. Sometimes putting your experience into words is the first step toward understanding it. And if this message reminded you of someone you love, share it with them or with the version of yourself who needed to hear it years ago. Subscribe to Avoidant Decoded for more conversations about avoidant attachment, emotional healing, and what happens when someone finally learns that real intimacy doesn't have to be something they run from. The deepest lesson is that avoidant love is not always absent. It can be hidden behind fear, silence, distance, and imperfect attempts at connection. But understanding someone's wounds should never require you to abandon your own needs or question your worth. Real healing begins when fear is met with awareness, love is met with honesty, and both people choose to build safety instead of running from it. Sometimes understanding brings two people closer, and sometimes it gives you the strength to finally let go, but either way, clarity sets you free.